There is a currency in the United States that has quietly outperformed the dollar. It doesn't move when the Fed raises interest rates. Nobody's printing more of it. It's shelf stable for 2 years. It fits in your pocket, and there's a decent chance you've got a unit of it sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now. I'm talking about ramen, instant ramen noodles. The same block of dried noodles you survived college on for $1 a pack. Inside American prisons, that little brick has become more trusted, more stable, and in some ways more functional than actual cash. So how does a college dorm staple become the backbone of an entire underground economy? How do you go from cheap snack to de facto national currency inside a federal institution? And why does this tiny noodle economy behave exactly like a real one? Booms, crashes, inflation, the whole thing. Stick with me, because this story has bad food, prison labor, black markets, and a full-blown currency crash. And by the end, you're never going to look at a 2-minute noodle the same way again. Let's start with the boring part, because the boring part is actually the whole reason this happened. Prison food is bad. That's not new. That's not a secret. That's basically the premise of every prison movie ever made. But over the last 2 decades or so, in a lot of facilities across the U.S., it got worse. Budget cuts, privatized food contracts, portion sizes shrinking, meals getting swapped out for cheaper substitutes. In some places, incarcerated people describe meals that are barely enough calories to get through a full day of actual physical labor. And here's the thing, a lot of these facilities also have commissaries, basically the prison version of a convenience store, where people can buy extra food if they have money on their books. Chips, coffee, snacks, and ramen. Now combine that with problem number 2, wages. In most U.S. state prisons, incarcerated workers get paid for their labor, kitchen work, laundry, maintenance, but we're talking cents per hour, not dollars, cents. In some states, it's closer to 0. So you've got a population that's underfed, working real jobs, and getting paid in what is functionally pocket change. Put those two things together, bad food plus almost no money, and you get a very predictable human response. People start trading what they have for what they need. And ramen checks every box you'd want in a currency. It's cheap enough that almost everyone can get some. It doesn't spoil for a long time, so it holds its value. It comes in a standard unit. 1 packet is 1 packet. There's no ambiguity. Everybody agrees on what it's worth. And critically, everyone wants it because it's actually filling. It's flavorful compared to the cafeteria food, and you can doctor it up 100 different ways with whatever else you've got. Congratulations, ramen just accidentally satisfied the 3 basic requirements economists use to define money. It's a medium of exchange. You can trade it for stuff. It's a unit of account. People literally price things in how many ramens. And it's a store of value. It doesn't rot in your locker for months. A pack of ramen isn't just a snack anymore. It's a coin. And once people realized that, the economy that built itself around it got surprisingly sophisticated. Researchers who've studied this, there's a well-known academic paper out of the University of Arizona that basically mapped out how deep this goes, found that ramen gets used to pay for almost anything you can imagine inside. Laundry service, a haircut, a cleaner cell, protection, a cut of commissary goods, gambling debts on football games or card games get settled in ramen. People literally save up stacks of it like it's a bank account, hiding reserves, building up savings, occasionally getting robbed. Because yes, there is such a thing as ramen theft. And yes, it is taken dead serious. Here's a fun detail. Some people inside don't even eat the ramen they're holding. They treat it purely as currency. Just like you don't necessarily plan on spending every dollar in your wallet, some guys are just stockpiling noodle wealth. It becomes less about the food and literally just about the numbers stacking up. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, that's a clever little workaround, kind of a fun fact, cute story, moving on. But hang on, because this is where it stops being a fun fact and starts being an actual economy with actual economic problems, including, I promise I'm not making this up, inflation. Now, let's talk about how a noodle economy crashes. Real currencies get their value from trust and scarcity. The second either of those breaks down, you get inflation. Prices go up because the money itself is worth less. And the exact same thing happens with prison ramen. Here's how it plays out. Commissary prices aren't fixed forever. When a prison raises the price of ramen at the store, or when a facility runs a lockdown and commissary access gets cut off for a while, suddenly the ramen already in circulation becomes more valuable because there's less of it flowing in. That's a supply shock, same as when a real economy has a shortage. On the flip side, sometimes a big batch of new inventory hits the system. Commissary gets restocked, more people get pay from work, everybody's suddenly holding way more ramen than usual. Prices for services measured in ramen start creeping up because there's suddenly a lot more currency chasing the same limited number of haircuts and favors. That's basic inflation. Too much money, same amount of stuff, so each unit buys less. There's also counterfeiting. Sort of. Trading expired packs, or repackaged ones, or straight up lying about what you're offering. The prison equivalent of passing off a fake bill. Trust breaks down a little every time that happens. And when trust breaks down in any currency, real or noodle, its value starts to wobble. And then there's the gambling angle, which honestly might be the most chaotic part. Big sports events, card games, dice games, huge amounts of ramen change hands in single nights, which means you get sudden wealth concentration, sudden crashes for people who bet wrong, entire little booms and busts happening on a Sunday afternoon because of a football game. It's basically a tiny, noodle-based Wall Street, minus the suits, plus a lot more risk of getting your stash stolen out of your bunk. So if you zoom out, what you're actually looking at is a real, functioning economy with real economic behavior. Supply and demand, inflation, savings, debt, gambling bubbles that emerged completely informally, with zero central bank, zero regulation, and zero one designing it on purpose. It just happened. Because humans, when you take away their normal economic tools, will always build a new system out of whatever's available. And this actually isn't even the first time this has happened. This is the fun history nugget, so stay with me. Back in World War II, a British economist named R.A. Radford was held in a German prisoner of war camp. And while he was there, he did what economists apparently cannot help but do. He started observing the economy that formed inside the camp. Except in that case, the currency wasn't noodles, it was cigarettes. Same exact logic. Cigarettes were standardized, durable, universally wanted, and rationed through Red Cross care packages, so everyone had some. Prisoners started pricing everything in cigarettes. Prices moved based on supply. When a big Red Cross shipment came in, cigarette currency flooded the camp and prices went up. Actual inflation in a prisoner of war camp tracked in real time. When shipments got delayed, cigarette currency got scarce, and suddenly a single smoke could buy you a lot more. Radford wrote it all up afterward in a paper that's still taught in economics classes today, because it's basically a perfect, clean, real-world example of how money originates. Not from a government stamping a value on paper, but from people just agreeing, informally, that something scarce and useful is worth trading for other things. Ramen in American prisons is the 21st century version of that exact same story. Same mechanism, different snack. And honestly, that's the part that sticks with me. We think of money as this official, complicated thing. Central banks, interest rates, mortgage rates, whatever's happening with the stock market this week. But strip all of that away. Drop people into a situation with no formal economy, and money reappears anyway, on its own, every single time. Whether it's cigarettes in a POW camp or instant noodles in a state prison, humans cannot help but reinvent currency the second they need to trade. Which honestly makes you wonder, if the system collapsed tomorrow, what's the ramen in your pantry? What's the thing you're already holding that everyone else would suddenly want? Because if history's any indication, cheap, shelf-stable, and universally craved is a pretty unbeatable combination. The dollars had a good run, but somewhere in a prison commissary line right now, a pack of instant noodles is quietly proving it could probably do the job too. If this kind of story is your thing, the weird, accidental economies that build themselves out of nothing, let me know, because there are a lot more of these hiding in plain sight.